Hey guys, what's up? Week 475. I'm doing this at a little different time, so I may seem a little bit scuzzy, different angles and everything like that before work. But yeah, let's dive right into the reviews. And the first one up is from they say 70 on here. I always thought it was 71, but I may be mistaken. And this is an Australian classic directed by Canadian director Ted Kotcheff. This is Wake and Fright, the new 4K from Arrow Video. And I believe this had a 4K in Australia, which is where it's from. Basically probably one of the most popular Australian cult movies ever made. I seen this a few years back on the old Alamo Drafthouse release, and I feel like Arrow's putting out a lot of the Alamo Drafthouse stuff, Cheap Thrills, Miss 45, so I love to see it. And they definitely picked some of their best titles with these three. But Wake and Fright, oh boy, this is actually based off a novel, which I believe, what year was this written? 1960? And it's supposed to kind of encapsulate a little bit of the Australian culture, maybe. I don't want to even say a condemnation of it, but somewhat of like the drinking culture and being like trapped in the cycle and whatnot, if you will. But it stars the actor in here. What is his name? In the film, it's John Grant, but he's an actor that I'm not super familiar with. He was a theater actor. It's Gary Bond. Absolutely fantastic performance. I had to cheat there. But I think most people will recognize Donald Pleasence as the kind of the big, I guess, star in this one. Pleasence throughout the 50s and 60s and 70s, and especially 60s and 70s, who's doing a lot of wild and weird roles. And I think that Doc Taidan is one of his best roles, one of his most memorable roles in here. Yeah, so this one is a bizarre one. Now, I don't know what you'd call it, a thriller, drama, psychological horror film, but we have this teacher who teaches in basically a town that has a schoolhouse, and right across the street, past the railroad tracks, is a bar. That's pretty much all this place has. He feels kind of like he's better than a lot of the people. He's an educated man, bizarre kind of guy, and definitely has some, sexuality problems, some things of that nature, kind of looking inwards towards himself and that nature. So he's planning on going to Sydney, but he's got to stop in the Yaba for a day, and he kind of ends up, thinking he's better than this place. Everybody's like, oh, what's not to love about the Yaba? The Yaba's so great. Everybody's so friendly. And he ends up going to this bar, and he meets like the town sheriff, and the sheriff kind of takes him under his arm and starts talking to him. Very memorable character actor from Australia. I don't even know if he's a character actor. Pretty big actor. This is his last film, and the whole back and forth is great. And you kind of get this arrogance about this guy that thinks he's better than everybody, and he's not. He's really not better than anybody. As you can tell, he has no impulse control. And pretty soon he's watching these guys drink and gamble, and before long he pretty much gambles all the money that he has away, because he gets the idea that he wants to buy out of his teacher, his basically his servitude, his teacher servitude, and he owes $1,000 on it in 1970. That's no chump change. So basically, what happens is he gets kind of stranded in this small this Yaba town, and he starts to kind of hang around these group of guys, and all they do is nonstop drinking. It's this nonstop, basically fever dream in this incredible heat and this incredibly wild and weird landscape. And what really stands out, I would say, besides the editing is very horror-oriented in a lot of ways. The weird kind of cuts and the blackout drunk scenes, they're re-edited after that. They just definitely bring a sense of horror and just a regret, to be honest, in a lot of it. But the one thing that this movie is really infamous for is the kangaroo hunt scene, which the director is adamant about, that they didn't kill any kangaroos for the movie. They just went along with the hunt and recorded it. It's a very unpleasant scene. I mean, we are used to animal cruelty in the 70s and 80s, but kangaroos is something that I don't think many people have seen killed. And being kind of in the Western world here, we don't typically see kangaroo that much. So seeing like an exotic animal to us massacred, I think was a little bit kind of extreme for us, and that scene still holds up as one of the most kind of disturbing scenes of any movie of its time. See, the thing about Donald Pleasence's character, he is this alcoholic, and he lives in the outskirts, and he talks about Yaba as, I am a practicing, doctor, but I don't do things for money. I do things for what I need. My friends give me food, and I practice on these people, these medical things on these people, and they give me my drink. He's very sarcastic and funny in a lot of ways, but he's incredibly deviant, I guess you would say, and just generally terrifying in a lot of ways as well. But yeah, there's some twisted scenes in this film, some memorable scenes, and how it these characters have these brawls between them that escalates as a playful fight to an all-out physical assault on each other, and just the demeanor of people. going at 3 o'clock in the morning and breaking this guy's bar windows until he starts serving you alcohol, and the guy just starts serving him like it's an everyday thing, and sweeping and everything and trying to break up the fight. So like there's just such a different cultural difference, and I guess Ted Kotcheff was kind of brought interested in the source material because he can see the kind of same similarity to the Canadian kind of drinking culture and all that kind of stuff like that. And he also mentions, being around these people, he kind of understood that they were just lacking on physical touch and affection, because this place is based on the real place, I can't remember, Broken Hill, which is where a lot of other films were taking place, and there's like 3 men to 1 woman, so there's obviously a lot of issues in that aspect there. So it's like it brings all this kind of weird stuff to the forefront. It's excellently acted, and not just from the leads like Gary Bond and Donald Pleasance, but even the side characters and the Australian actors and the locals and stuff, they just fit perfectly. And the way it's filmed, the way it's edited, really stands out. And the iconic imagery of Donald Pleasance wearing the coins on his eyes like he's dead, but it's a game they play that they do this flip game. But excellent movie, very memorable movie. It looks fantastic in 4K. I was kind of surprised how good it looked, being such an old movie. I mean, but this movie, it takes advantage of its landscapes. It takes advantage of the heat. It uses all that to its advantage, with that bright yellow desert kind of style and the big blue skies and everything like that. So it definitely looks great, but it also looks like a horrifying landscape. Australia being a desert and stuff, it's just two different, kind of temperatures back and forth, but the whole movie seems entirely hot. Just there's these scenes where Donald Pleasance is going completely insane, chugging beer on his head, just stuff that you don't see a lot of actors do nowadays. Very method, seemingly. But as far as that's concerned, I mean, Donald Pleasance seemed to always have like a very relaxed nature on set, and they say a lot of the stories you hear about him, he just kind of takes it all in and everything of that nature, and it seems that he was like that as well on here. And even in movies where like they were going to shit, like the Nosferatu in Venice, he was just standing back like, whatever, man. But as far as the special features are concerned, we have a slew of them. We have the commentary by Ted Kotcheff and editor Anthony Buckley, which was from the original Blu-ray. Then we have a new commentary by Peter Gavin, author of Making of Wake and Fright. Return to Yaba, feature at tracking down the film's Broken Hills locations. This is like 49 minutes, great stuff. Interviews with locals and other actors and all the kind of stuff like that. Taken Fright, an interview with director of photography Brian West. Sounds of the Outback, a previously unreleased interview with sound editors Keith Palmer and Eddie Joseph. The Cinema's Great Squeaky Bald Git, an appreciation of actor Donald Pleasance by film historian Kim Newman. Love that. 15 minutes, dives into his career, and it's a very appreciative kind of thing on here. He definitely is a big fan of him, and I did like watching the Brian West, Keith Palmer, and Eddie Joseph stuff, as they have more context on the filmmaking and things of that nature, talking about Ted Kotcheff and some of the tricks they did to get that kangaroo hunt over. The filmmaker and the film buff, a discussion between Philip Mora and Paul Harris. Felipe Mora was the director of The Howling 2 and 3, The Marsupials, did some other movies like The Beast Within, which is great. He's directed a handful of cool movies, Australian director, and him and Paul Harris basically talk about Wake and Fright and stuff like that. Interesting, good, nice talk. You're Mad, You Bastard, an archive interview with director Ted Kotcheff. Not quite Hollywood, archive interview with actor Jack Thompson. That's about 7 minutes long, and the Ted Kotcheff is like 12 minutes long. This one is conducted by Paul Harris. Audio interview with composer John Stout conducted. There's an audio interview with Ted Kotcheff. It's like 2 hours long. Then there's also an audio Q&A with Ted Kotcheff from 29. Where am I at here? 2009. That's just 45 minutes, and then the audio interviews with the composer John Scott, conducted by film historian Daniel Swinger. Alternate scenes from Outback, 2009 TV report on the rediscovery and restoration of Wake and Fright, Who Needs Art, a 71 TV segment with behind-the-scenes footage, Chips Rafferty obituary by Ken G. Hall. He's the kind of classic Australian actor. This is his last film. I Can Chug a Beer Like Nobody's Business. U.S. theatrical trailer and TV spot. Forward visions of local stories. A trailer reel of Australian films hemmed by overseas filmmakers. Image gallery collector's booklet featuring new writings on the film by Jay Slater, Paul Lee, and David Matthew Brown. Plus archive materials, reversible sleeve featuring original and newly commissioned artwork by Jeff Marshall. So a great release here. Excellent one. If you've never seen Wake and Fright, I would recommend it, especially if you like dark drama thrillers that kind of bleed into the horror world. Wake and Fright is definitely for you. That iconic shot of Donald Pleasance there laughing. And Gary Bond, I believe, was an homosexual actor who ended up dying of HIV, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully I'm getting that right. I don't want to say it, but just a very interesting kind of person that I didn't know too much about. I mean, he's tremendous in this movie, and this is kind of a rare, I guess being foreign, it's not that rare, but full frontal nudity in the early 70s. I know the American version was actually edited. He was in his underwear, and there's a whole story about them getting this movie back and getting it released and everything everything of that nature. But just a great release. Rewatching it actually held up even better than the first time, I think. The next one from Arrow Video is going to be the Mortal Kombat Collection. Ooh, with a K. Mortal Kombat Collection with a K. And of course, these are 4Ks. And the Mortal Kombat movies are, the first one was a big deal when it came out. The Mortal Kombat movies were huge. And I had not watched Mortal Kombat, any of them, in a very, very long time. So popping in the first one, I was kind of excited. Now, Arrow had put out the previous Paul Anderson movie, Soldier, which I felt held up really well. And I was a little worried about Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat's definitely one that might not hold up as well. But as far as video game adaptations are concerned, I think Mortal Kombat sits among the best, especially of its time when you compare it to Double Dragon, Street Fighter, and Mario Brothers. I think Mortal Kombat is probably the best of the bunch. And when did this come out? I feel like it's always later than it is, 94, 95. And yeah, so in the theaters, I definitely saw this in theaters, that big scene when they scream Mortal Kombat. I feel like everybody flipped out when we saw that here. So essentially, Mortal Kombat was a video game in the 90s for Sega Genesis. Maybe it was Super Nintendo as well. We had it on Sega Genesis with the blood in there. Blood was a big deal at the time in the video game. And you could pick from 7 kind of fighters in the vein of like a Street Fighter style game or something like that. So obviously, they wanted to do a movie adaptation. And Paul Anderson had done Shopping, and he had done, I think, Soldiers after this. Shopping was, is Paul Anderson actually an English director that works out of Australia 100%? I'm probably mixing that up. But he made the Shopping movie that was a pretty big deal, so he gets Mortal Kombat. And yeah, they ended up making this thing and trying to stay somewhat true to the video game, although there's comics that are tied to it. But as far as it's concerned, I think basically you just want to get a lot of the characters in here. So as far as the cast is concerned, you have Robin Shaw, who was a stunt guy. And he didn't do that many movies. He did Beverly Hills Ninja, and he did the sequel to Mortal Kombat Annihilation. And watching him as Liu Kang, I think he's perfectly cast. A kind of like Bruce Lee style character in the video game, Liu Kang. But he's absolutely fantastic. I actually think that he's a great Liu Kang, and I would have liked to see him in a lot more movies. Kind of a shame that he didn't continue his acting, but after Annihilation, maybe it was just kind of a flop, and he just didn't want to continue that kind of deal, or what bad critical reviews. We also have Bridget, I think, Nielsen, who is in, not Bridget Nielsen, I always forget her name. This is going to be me forgetting her name, but she's in Billy Madison. She plays Sonya Blade. Didn't actually have any martial arts training. Then we have Lyndon Ashley, who plays Johnny Cage, kind of like the Jean-Claude Van Damme character. In fact, Johnny Cage was actually based around Jean-Claude Van Damme, and the video game was supposed to be that, and the movie was supposed to be that as well, but Jean-Claude Van Damme was making Street Fighter. So I think Lyndon Ashley is one of the best parts of the movie. Shang Tsung is played by a classic Japanese character actor as the villain. Very good performance. And then we have Trevor Goddard as Kano. And he was this actor who wasn't from Australia, but he always carried this Australian accent. He's in Men of War, and he was in Deep Rising and Flexing with Money. He was a good character actor that died way too young, but Kano was probably one of the most memorable things from the film for me as a kid that took it away. Kano was just an absolutely ridiculous character in the film and the video game, and he was my personal choice on there. And we also, of course, have Sub-Zero and Scorpion and Raiden, played by Christopher Lambert, which is perfect to get him kind of star power in here coming out of the Highlander movies and whatnot. So the plot is fairly simple, right? All these people, their Shang Tsung is this evil sorcerer, and they have this kind of every year. I don't know how long it takes, but basically they have these Mortal Kombats, right? Where the best martial artists of the world have to face off against this other realm, the outer world, or whatever realm kind of people. The outer world is another world that was taken over by Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn and kind of destroyed and whatnot. That's where one of the characters, Katana, is from. So essentially, they have to fight 10 in a row, beat all the immortals 10 in a row to basically invade their Earth and take it over. So this is number 9. So it comes down to basically Johnny Cage, Liu Kang, and Sonya Blade going into this tournament and winning. And they have to face off against all sorts of crazy characters, including, like mentioned, Sub-Zero, Scorpion, and we also have Reptile, who's a terrible CGI blob at first, but eventually does get his famous ninja suit, and Goro, who is the basically the champion of it. Goro is a giant foreign monster, and what's so cool about Goro is that they use a mixture of mostly practical animatronic effects, along with a little bit of, I think there's some digital in there, but Goro is actually terrifying in the way he moves. It was incredibly hard, you can tell. And one of the old classic guys in the monster suit, Tom Woodruff, is in the suit, worked on the effects. He also worked on Monster Squad and the Creature from Black Lagoon effects, so that's a nice touch. So this movie generally is a lot better than I remembered. The fights are incredibly fun. The plot plot is a little hokey, and sometimes it gets really cheesy with the skulls in the air. There's a great interview with Lyndon Ashley where he's like, that was the cheesiest thing I ever seen. And he's 100% right. I even started laughing. I didn't remember that. But I think, honestly, this is an incredibly fun movie. I think that mixing in the techno soundtrack and the actual things from the game help a lot. I think that as far as a game that most people probably didn't know the backstories or plots or anything of that nature, just to fight them up, I think that they did the best that they possibly could for an audience. I mean, they've had a sequel, of course, which I'll talk about in a bit, but then they had other more modern day sequels, which I think are probably more close to the source material, because Mortal Kombat's become an incredibly rich and deep mythology that's much more, deeper than what this movie had access to. But I think Paul Anderson honestly did a pretty damn good job for this kind of big summer blockbuster, and it holds up. It's not absolutely garbage. I was very entertained with it, and I was like, I would definitely check out Mortal Kombat. I definitely would rewatch this one. As far as the features, we got a slew. Of course, we have Dolby Vision, HDR 10 compatible, MP 5.1 surround sound, optional English subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing, brand new audio commentary with director Paul Anderson, brand new commentary with comic book expert and podcast host Dave Baxter. The Paul Anderson commentary is pretty decent, a lot of technical stuff and things like that. Dave Baxter talks about the comics history and all that things, although he did make a slight mistake, as we all do. He mentioned that he forgot to mention Kotaro as a sub-boss. He mentioned that Shiva was a sub-boss in part 2, but she doesn't even come into the games until 3, and she's a pickable character. Kotaro is a sub-boss in part 2. Completely understandable. Cage Match, a newly filmed interview with actor Lyndon Ashby. Leveling Up, a new interview with cinematographer John R. Leonetti, which is important because he went on to direct the second one. Quarters to Millions, a newly filmed interview with producer Lawrence Kasanoff, who really thought this was going to be a great thing and went down to get this. Didn't know much about games, but he saw how well it was doing and had a feeling. The Heavyweight, a newly filmed interview with designer and super performer Tom Woodruff. Gotta love that. Mortal Kombat, a journey behind the scenes featurette, on-set interview bites with cast and crew, and B-roll footage. Theatrical trailer, image gallery, reversible sleeve, featuring original newly commissioned artwork by Matt Griffin. This holds up a lot better than I remembered, looks good, and of course the sound is great with all that pump and techno and sound effects and things of that nature. So if it sounds like it's up your alley, check it out. Mortal Kombat, great stuff. Okay, we're moving into the second Mortal Kombat here. Of course, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, made in 1997, directed by John R. Leonetti, who was the cinematographer on the first movie. He brought in his brother, his older brother, who had worked with him in movies and stuff, and they decided to make this. He was his DP this time. He was the boss. So Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Now, before I talk negative about this thing, I do want to mention that by this time, Mortal Kombat 3 had been out, so we have already had so many more. We have 14 playable characters in Mortal Kombat 3, and we're bringing back characters from the first film that are still alive. So we have so many characters to deal with here. And it definitely seems like it's shoehorned in to try to get all the characters that they can. It definitely seems like there's probably reshoots for more fights and things of that nature. But we bring in all the characters, of course, that we can. Sonya Blade does not, the actress who played Sonya Blade does not come back. They got somebody who's a little bit better with martial arts. Johnny Cage is dispatched within the first 5-10 minutes of the movie, which I think upsets a lot of people, because Johnny Cage was probably one of the fan favorites, especially in the movie. In the game, he's funny. He's not the best. But in the first film, he has all the best lines. Those are $500 sunglasses. He's just funny. He's great comic relief, and I think maybe the audience kind of pleaser, to be honest. Liu Kane does come back, and we still have Katana and things of that nature. Shao Kahn steps in, and he's played by legendary kind of character actor Brian Thompson, who I've always enjoyed from stuff like Fright Night 2, Cobra, Terminator. He's just a really Lionheart. So he's one of these guys that I've always loved. As Shao Kahn, he's fine. I think he doesn't do a bad job. I think the writing on the characters is a little corny and cheesy, and this one is kind of incredibly cheesy. Christopher Lambert does not come back because his price tag was like $2 million or something, so they replace him with James Remar. A good replacement, but still, I would like to see Christopher Lambert reprise the role. I like James Remar fine, Warriors and a bunch of other things, Blackcoat's Daughter. But so it's just an odd, it definitely seems like a B picture. It seems cheaper. I don't know if it actually was cheaper, but even if it was the same cost, they had so many more characters to deal with. And they do a lot of things where a lot of the characters' whole entire character is just bickering back and forth, and like Shiva and Ermac and Mataro. And Mataro is just an embarrassingly goofy performance, to be honest, by Mataro and Shiva, just because they use practical effects, which and some digital, but they look pretty decent. But the faces and stuff is cornball, and they'll cut back to them just doing dumb chewing the scenery and ridiculous scenes of that nature. They actually bring in Shinnok. Shinnok, I can't think of the character's name. He's from a later Mortal Kombat game, but he's actually Shao Kahn's like father and whatnot. And they reveal more of the story. This one is pretty cornball, pretty cheesy, but some of the fights are fun. It's not a completely unwatchable movie. I kind of give them some admiration for how many characters they crammed in the damn thing. And I remember people still complaining that they're like, well, they wrote off Stryker and Cabal and all that kind of stuff. And I do think that the way that Jade and Rain was dispatched was pretty bad, pretty horrible kind of cornball writing, which is the very generic thing to do when the bad guy doesn't get his way. He kills off people that are incredibly powerful that could help him out just because he's mad. It's just silly kind of writing like that I don't really care for, but at the same time, it does occasionally work. I don't know if it works here. The special effects, I don't know if they're as good to me. Maybe it's just a little bit more going on and cheesiness that I just can't get over. I don't think it's the worst thing ever. I just think it's a substantially worse film than the first one, and I imagine that they had less to deal with. As far as the features are less to work with, is what I mean. As far as special features are concerned, we have films approved by Johnny Leonetti, the restoration, sorry about that, from the original Camneg, HDR compatible, Dolby Vision, optional original DTS HT 5.1 surround sound, optional subtitles, of course, brand new commentary with the director, moderated by filmmaker Gillian Wallace Horvat. That's pretty decent. She asks a lot of questions. Brand new audio commentary with comic book expert and podcast host Dave Baxter returns. The Queen of the Night, newly filmed interview with actor Muzetta Vander. She plays Sindel, and she talks about getting ready for the role and all that kind of stuff like that. Always playing like villainous characters. Taco Orcho, a newly filmed interview with composer George S. Clinton. Talks a little bit about how he came with the score and all that kind of stuff. And The Man of a Thousand Deaths, newly filmed interview with stunt performer J.J. Perry, who played Cyrax, Scorpion, and Noob Sabat. That's fun. Talking about how he got into the industry and how he got connected with this movie. On-set interviews, bites with the cast and crew, and B-roll footage, theatrical trailer, image gallery, reversible sleeve featuring original and newly commissioned artwork by Matt Griffin. So it's going to look as good as it ever did. Unfortunately, I don't know if this movie is that great in the first place. It feels honestly like a very cheesy, fun sci-fi channel original or something of that nature, but it was a very huge budgeted movie. I appreciate how many characters they got in there, but I honestly would have probably slimmed back a little bit and just made some things a little bit different. But it's a nice set. If you like the films, I think it's worth picking up. I still think the first Mortal Kombat holds up really well. The second one is kind of a funny, kind of cheesy piece, but check it out if it sounds like it's up your alley. Okay, we're continuing the Adventure Calls, the Carl May films at CCC, and we are on film, 5 I think we're at? Let me get it out of here, of course. We have In the Kingdom of the Silver Lion, and this is the last of the Orient kind of trilogy here. Same director as the Wilds of Turkestan, and brings back pretty much the same entire cast. Hey, even the same villain, even though he's already freaking dead. So I don't really, again, have all that much to say about this one, because it's just a big, fun adventure film that repeats a lot of the stuff from the last film. This time around, Lex Baxter is, they're kind of you think it's all toned down and everything of that nature, but he has to go on, I can't remember the exact mission, whatnot, but they're looking for the body of the bad guy that they ended up ousting as a villain, and the king and everybody turned against him and wanted him as head and everything like that. But what happens is, of course, this guy is still alive. He somehow gets back in the good graces of the ruler guy and makes Lex Baxter seem like a villain. So everybody's after him. He gets captured. There's this pretty memorable scene where he says, basically, I'm going to try to ride away, and if you shoot me, I die, but if I get away, you must set me and my friend free. It's Allah's will if he lets me live. And Fernando Sanchez does agree to this, who's they've been the king in both the films. I don't know, the king, the sultan, whatever you want to say, but basically the royalty of this area. So that's basically how he gets back in the good graces, and of course he's going to go finally have this giant showdown with this guy on this crazy kind of weird rope bridge thing, this manual rope bridge. That's kind of like a combination of a rope bridge, but also the kind of pull water thing that you normally do, going back and forth. Very unique. This one is overall decent. It's fun. It's very much in the same vein as the previous film, but there's a couple things that stand out that I wouldn't have picked up on because I have not seen this movie, Lawrence of Arabia. I guess it fits in a lot with that, lifts directly from that to a certain extent. But where we go here and get to the new introductions for each film, Sir Christopher Frayling mentions that, he talks about this lifting from Lawrence of Arabia, having the drinking the water you're not supposed to and everything of that nature. But we have this great Heroes on Horseback interview, new interview with film historian, with producer Alice Bronner, managing director of CCC Film and daughter of co-CCC founder Arthur Bronner. And that's great. That's 15 minutes. It's in German. She talks about her father. She talks about Baxter, working with him, how their films at CCC, although maybe they're not as good as the Rialto Winna, Old Shatterhand movies. I think that they have a more international appeal, that they appeal to a larger audience, and they've done very well internationally, and people are still asking for them, and they still have the popularity that they had back in the day. And Prodigal Son, new interview with film historian Sheldon Hall on the life and career of Robert Sidomak. I think that one's on here as well, and he went to Hollywood and directed some movies of that nature. So basically, a lot of this kind of stuff is mixing up on me, and it's fun. Again, this is really weird because essentially these feel a lot like serials, right? Where you open it up, a book, an adventure book, and it's more of the same kind of storyline. So you're looking to explain more things that happen, and you're like, it's very much in the kind of the vein of the Hammer Draculas, right? But with that kind of stuff, I'm more familiar with the Horde directors and the actors would pop up in them, and you always remember a very elaborate death scene in here. But these are like three of the same kind of continuation story here. We have The Shoot, and then we have Through Wild Kurdistan, and of course In the Kingdom of the Silver Lion. Those are the trilogy here, and the first time we had a duo of Old Shatterhand and Winnetou and Shatterhand and the Valley of Death. These also have alternate titles being in German and whatnot, but these are all filmed in Spain, if I'm not mistaken. But the last two are Treasures of the Aztec and the Pyramids of the Sun God, which I also think go together. But all the characters return in this as well. The classic British gentleman who's hilarious, his butler, and his old Arabic friend, the Muslim friend who has the longest name in the world. But these look great, so mind you on that. And it is only in German. This one does not have English, dub. Like the first two, Old Shatterhand movies do have the English dub on there. But yeah, overall, pretty entertaining movie. No better or worse than the other films in this set. So a pretty solid set overall. So yeah, check it out. The Adventure Calls, the Carl May at CCC. All right, we're continuing the box set of Lucile Hadžihalilović from Severn Films here, and we're in the third one here, and this one is called Earwig from 2021. Not heard much about this film, to be honest, and it is super bizarre. So the first two films, of course, we had Innocence and Evolution, which I thought worked really well, and I think that they had the right amount of story. I think Innocence started off the best, and then we had the mystery and the story and how it unfolds and the cinematography and things of that nature. And Evolution was a step back, but interesting as well in a different kind of way. And I think Earwig is a step back in not necessarily bad, just personal preference here. This director, she tends to want to shoot her films dark with a lot of natural lighting, which create a lot of darkness. And at times, if the room's not completely dark or not the right perfect setting for absolutely everything, sometimes things are hard to see, and she's definitely trying to create this surreal world, this weird kind of bizarre mystery world. They're all coming-of-age films within that surreal world, which I think works well with that kind of subgenre, that coming-of-age and surrealness, I think go well together because it's a confusing time and a weird time. And also she creates these bizarre worlds. So essentially we're following this odd man who's taking care of this young girl who doesn't have any teeth, and he's making these ice teeth for her, these bizarre ice teeth. This is also based on a novel, which Lucile said she didn't exactly. She's definitely going to betray the novel to the writer, and he said that's fine, go ahead and do it. I would be upset if you didn't. So it's definitely the way to make this, and she makes something, I guess, different from the novel source material. But the film itself, for me, was kind of a chore, and I don't mean that as a bad film. It's kind of one of these deals where I feel like there's a lot of abstract stuff and a lot of stuff that like emotionally might make a lot of sense, but as a whole storytelling arc, it doesn't necessarily work. And there's very rare directors that work for me when we kind of go into this aspect. Like David Lynch somehow always works for me when I'm watching his movies. Like I'm watching them and it makes sense, logical sense within the narrative of the story, the surrealness and weirdness of the story. And there's some stuff in here that makes sense to me, that a character has this weird shared kind of mind after something happened with them where they're entangled to a certain weird way. Not necessarily sure how that works, and I think the ending is visually beautiful and all that kind of stuff, like what's happening, but I don't really grasp exactly what the hell is going on. It is genuinely creepy and unsettling and unpleasant, and there's some real visual nastiness, especially with a glass beer bottle going in someone's kind of cheek, and it kind of reoccurs to that one point. But Earwig is one of these movies where I can't give like a wholehearted recommend in terms of just what I personally like, because this is my least favorite of the set. I'm not necessarily sure the points or meaning, or if I'm supposed to grasp them. Visually, like I said, it is an interesting kind of take on it, but it's incredibly too dark for my preferences. I really can't tell what's going on a lot of the times, and that kind of creates this disconnect for me where I've kind of disconnected distracted from the movie and trying not to, if I have to struggle to understand what's happening and even see what the hell's happening, then therefore I'm a little bit kind of lost on it. I don't think this was a bad movie. It's a thing where people say I didn't like something or it's very weird and bizarre, so I think it's bad. That's absolutely not the case. I mean, the filmmaking techniques are still interesting. I think the acting is good. I think the concept to a certain extent is interesting to me, but I just took away from this one. I just didn't think this one was it wasn't for me. I think it was just a little too abstract, and I'm hitting at that point in my life, I guess, where a lot of abstract art just doesn't do much for me, if that makes any sense. And I don't know if that comes with old age or just the idea that if I feel like there's a disconnect from it, I can't necessarily get back into it. And as far as the special features are concerned, we have introduction by Lucile Hadžihalilović. She does it on all of them. Interview with cinematographer Jonathan Rigzoborough. Interview with writer Jeff Cox. And archival interview with Lucile Hadžihalilović as well. They helped with a little bit of the concept, the context on this movie, because I had absolutely no idea what the hell was going on and why it was so bizarre. But it is a really weird one. And there's times with this big mansion here that reminds me of stuff like Flowers in the Attic visually, when the characters are running away from that kind of old mansion. But overall, I don't know if this is definitely made for a distinct audience. And I think Innocence is definitely the most, I would say the best. I think the best overall movie. I think it's a really good, strong film. And I would say that Evolution is maybe the most approachable from a horror group. But I think Earwig is definitely more into the art crowd for sure, and it's more, and I guess maybe my preferences are showing, but I think Innocence is an art film, but I think an interesting one. This one, I think, is less my style. I think a little less straightforward and just almost kind of baffling to a weird extent. And maybe a theater viewing would help with this one, because this idea that you're kind of trapped in there, your mind can't drift as much in a theater. But Earwig, interesting stuff. I think some people would enjoy this. It's near 2 hours long. Again, I'm always complaining about run times, and I do think this one runs a little bit long, but a bizarre film nonetheless. Okay, I'm going to be very brief with this one. It's a 2026 theater watch, and I don't know all that much about the details, but I can just talk about the movie in general and my feelings. This is Backrooms. So I heard a lot of buzz about this one. I heard a lot of buzz about Obsession. I loved Obsession. I thought Obsession was great. So Backrooms, I really didn't know. I knew that it was made by a YouTuber based on kind of a short film. So I saw the runtime was a little long, about an hour and 42 minutes, which I think is a little long for a lot of horror films, unless it's kind of a giant epic, even though I just watched an 83 movies, and like Christine's an hour and 50, and it could have been longer for me, but it just all depends on the movie and everything of that nature. So I go to watch this, and at first I'm like, this point of view stuff is pretty effective, pretty creepy, and we have this liminal spaces is a lot what this thing is called, and it's kind of like an old man thing for me to be like, what's that? And it's like a strange kind of concept to grasp and things of that nature. I imagine it's people growing up kind of exploring abandoned malls and watching people explore abandoned malls, this whole liminal space kind of idea, kind of gauge, and I'm sure there's a lot more deeper definition of that and everything like that. But essentially what we have here is the guy who plays Baron Mordo in the Marvel films is this a guy who runs a furniture store, a struggling furniture store, and he's recently gone through like a divorce, and he's basically living in this furniture store, and he's having like these electrical problems, these weird kind of things happening, the TV shutting off, getting weird waves and like television waves. This one definitely takes place in like the early 90s or something along that nature. So one day he starts to kind of do investigation. He has an electrician come over, and he realizes that the power panel is just not necessarily hooked up right, and he starts to kind of move around, and he ends up finding this kind of weird hole in the wall. And it's not a hole in the wall, it's basically like a phase, kind of like in The Simpsons, where Homer goes in the wall hiding from Patty and Selma, and it's like the Tron world. But this is a little bit different. He kind of goes in here, and it's all these kind of rooms that look like giant spaces, office spaces, but they're not put together right. Everything's kind of like somebody put this together wrong. And it ends up this deep kind of catacomb of worlds. And at first he's kind of going through, and he seems like he may be getting lost, but then he kind of realizes there might be something else in there, and he kind of ends up like talking to a psychiatrist. That's also a big part of this, him like bringing a psychiatrist and feelings and all that kind of nature. And she's an odd character too, with a lot of trauma. In fact, I think that the lead guy in here, the Baron Mordo guy, is an excellent actor. I think the psychiatrist, I don't know if she's playing like the dead-eyed thing, but it's not a very memorable performance. It's a very deadpan kind of performance, and I don't know if she's doing the lack of emotion thing on purpose, but I don't think it's particularly good. And I'm not sure the other two actors, they're bad. They're not bad, but they're not great. This would have worked great as a VHS short or a short Twilight Zone episode or something of that nature, but as a feature of hour and 42 minutes, it wore out its welcome for me. The concepts are really cool. There's some genuinely terrifying moments that I thought were really effective. And like I said, the lead guy is actually great. And there's like dark kind of comedic moments too. But, overall, I think that it does get to the creepy moments, and I think that they could have done a lot with this. And what they choose to do is a little bit, I guess for the runtime is a little bit too, it's not enough. I think if you're going to make this movie that long, you could go a little bit further. But I don't think it's bad. I think it's definitely interesting. I think it's well worth watching, and I think it's creepy and weird and bizarre. And I'm glad to see it's doing so well, because I'd like to see some more creepy, weird, and bizarre movies in theaters, because it seems like a lot of people, they're giving more people chances than they did, or maybe they just don't. The big Hollywood movies aren't doing as well. Obviously, the Mandalorian film didn't do that well, and I just don't know if people even knew it was out or had much interest in it anymore. Kind of time has passed. But this is an interesting one. Weird movie, Backrooms. Maybe I'll rewatch it and have better thoughts on it, but I don't think it's horrible. I think it's worth watching. I just don't love it, and I think it's a little too long, and it gets a little bit boring for me, honestly. All right, let's get to those 1983 movies.
I have returned.
Okay. Show me.
Where is the music now? The sound of laughter. There was never laughter.
Like?
What's what like?
Screwing a psycho.
What the fuck was that?
It's gone.
Guy blows dead dogs. Just lay it in there.
Eat shit and die, Ricky!
Eat shit and live, Bill.
Yeah, Bill, he's a little wet.
31. 32. 32. Year of a man's prime, loved by many women. He might still learn to swim. 32. Going. Gone.
The kid was cut in half, Arnie. They had to scrape his legs up with a shovel. Well, isn't that what you're supposed to do with shit? Scrape it up with a little shovel?
One final moment of revenge.
Wondering what's real. All of it is real.
You want to see something really scary?
You bet.
Really?
Yeah.
Get the Videodrome! Long live the new flesh!
No choice but to kill the son of a bitch.
Living one's entire life in a state of fear. It is all I have ever known. Fear.
Are you ready?
Okay, go ahead. What are you doing?
Okay, we're going to dive back into this set. I haven't opened this one since I covered it originally, but I'm glad I have it. This is the Bill Rebane set, Weird Wisconsin. I love my regional horror films here, and watching all these together, some of them ended up being a chore, but I think this was the best disc of the bunch. This is the Alpha Incident and Demons of Ludlow. We're going to talk about Demons of Ludlow. Let me get it. I'll show you in another video. But Demons of Ludlow is '83 horror movie, of course, and this is a bizarre one. I kind of like this style here. It would definitely fit in with these Amityville horror films that came out, the haunted kind of the haunted items kind of films, right? So the Demons of Ludlow follows this small little town. The population's like 47. It's freezing cold here, of course, being in this Wisconsin area. And there's kind of like a reporter that's originally from this town. She's very interested in kind of like a history of the town. She's trying to write something. And they bring in this old grand piano. And they're like, everybody's like, oh yeah, this piano's cool. And it looks a little ominous, a little strange. And almost immediately weird things start to happen. And as they dig deeper, they realize that this piano has a hidden past. And this piano is a vessel for revenge. It's bringing back this old ancient person that was supposedly done wrong in this town. And he's going to start picking off ancestors, a la kind of like the Fog, right? Where we're like, oh, these people did us wrong, so their ancestors are going to be picked off here and there. And obviously the ancestors kind of are reminiscent of the people that are in the town. So people start to be picked off, including, women with psychological issues. And it's up to like the journalist and the priest. I think the guy's a journalist, the girl's a journalist, and the priest to try to figure this out before it's too late. Of course, the mayor gives the whole Jaws routine, right? There's nothing wrong with this town. Nobody's going to believe this nonsense. But we're having these kind of, I don't know what time period, but these classy kind of old school, like, I guess you'd say like, I mean, this is 1700s or something like that. Ghosts kind of wander into the frame and do all sorts of evil things. This movie has more nudity than expected. With a plot like that, you could see it being kind of like less, like any sleaze or anything like that. But they ended up packing in a couple scenes of nudity in here, probably very much of the time. And Bill Rebane is a interesting kind of Wisconsin kind of guy. He talks a little bit about this one. He doesn't have like an in-depth kind of commentary or anything of that nature, like 7 minutes in here and there. But it does have a couple decent scenes of gore. The one problem with this movie is after like the first kind of murder or kill, we kind of slow down for a long period of time, and where we have some investigative things and some ghostly things, and then it picks back up and characters are starting to get killed here and there. Overall, I think The Demons of Ludlow is definitely interesting, definitely fun, great atmosphere, and one of two, I think, Wisconsin kind of horror films along with Bloodbeat. I think Bloodbeat was actually made by a French guy in Wisconsin, though, so it's like an outsider making it and looking at Wisconsin from these. So it's great to see these two kind of Wisconsin horror films, and they're both rewatches this time around for me, and they both went up a little bit more. I actually enjoyed them a lot more this time. I think that a lot of these kind of movies like this, like something along the same line, like Ghost, what the hell is that one? Ghost Keeper from '81, the Canadian film. I think that's another one that's like has these subtle horrors, and it's not perfect, but the more you watch it, the more you kind of have an appreciation for it. And I think Demons of Ludlow is fun. I think it's cool. I like the concept too. The blood is in the piano, so the guy had come back through the vessel. I love that kind of stuff. I like the ghost revenge stories, and it's fun. It's a fun, solid movie. Cool little thing here. Looks decent, remastered, sounds decent, and you can watch it on Tubi, the remastered version, if you don't have the disc, the old Rebane disc here. You can check it out on Tubi. Okay, we're diving back into The Magic, Myth, and Mutilation, the micro-budget cinema of Michael J. Murphy, 1967 to 2015. Guy had a long, crazy, prolific career, British director here. And this, we're going to, I believe it, the first disc here, and we're going to talk about The Last Night. And I've actually talked about The Last Night because it was mistakenly listed as 82, and I watched it along with, what's the other one? What is that? Invitation to Hell, which I think is actually my favorite of Michael J. Murphy's movies. So The Last Night, I actually liked this a little bit better the first time I saw it. This time around, it is a 46-minute, I guess relatively, it counts as a short film, a little longer on the short ends here. But essentially what we have here is a last night of a performance, a theater group. They're terrible actors. It's pretty funny seeing them on stage act terribly. But a couple of escaped convicts, a la Last House on the Left, House on the Edge of the Park, kind of crazies like that, end up kind of crashing this last night of the performance, and they start to pick people off behind the scenes, and they have already established that they've killed people, and they're holding people like to death by ransom, and they say, you guys go out there and perform regular, or we'll start shooting into the crowd, and the crowd's that of like 20 people and whatnot. But the whole kind of thing on that issue is, like, if they already kill a couple of us, I'm absolutely not listening to anything they say. I'm going to try to attack them. There's like 12 of you and 10 more people at the party in the basement and 20 in the crowd. The idea that everybody just sort of listens to what they say, I just have a hard time buying it. Even favorite movies of mine where I'm like, I don't think that they would do that. It drives you a little crazy, but there's usually something that you can forgive, that you'll let it go, and whatnot, that kind of aspect like that. But this one, I feel like it's not there. Like, I'm just like, this is so stupid. These people are so dumb. And by the time they do stand up to it, it's way too late. But if they do stand up immediately, there's no movie there, if that makes any sense. I just have the wholehearted feeling that if they're not wearing masks and they kill one of you, they're going to kill all of you. And that's exactly what they plan to do, and it's pretty obvious from the get-go. But these characters just don't seem to want to realize that. So that just always drives me crazy. It kind of just sets this whole kind of dumb thing in motion. The acting's not amazing here. It's not a gore fest like Invitation to Hell, which I think is a little bit gorier in this. There's a couple moments of gore here and there. Of course, there is some dark stuff that does happen in the movie. The two psychopaths are pretty wild. I guess there's a scene of necrophiliac rape off screen. But overall, this one it's semi-tedious, kind of slasher style film. The ending is fun, and I like the kind of gag at the very, very ending when the character kind of goes into her birthday party all covered in gore and stuff like that. But just the premise is just kind of unbelievable, as a lot of these are. The idea that if they have nothing to hold over you except your life, and they've already established that they're willing to kill anyone, and they're going to kill everyone, then what the hell's the point of even listening to what they say? It doesn't make any sense to me. That's why something like coming home at night makes absolutely no sense to me. They've already got rid of their barter chips to control you. So, and that aspect, this one is all right. It is shot on film. A lot of his movies end up being SOV, but I do think it's around the same caliber as The Hereafter, which he also released this year. Actually, I think The Hereafter might be a little worse. I think that one actually tends to be fairly tedious, kind of gothic horror style thing by Michael Murphy. And I hate like dogging on Michael Murphy because he's just like classic, like not classic, but he's like an independent kind of horror guy that made all these movies, that put his heart and soul into his movies and had a long, prolific career. I just wish I enjoyed his movies a little bit more. I think Invitation to Hell is a fun one, and hopefully I find something I really dig. But I remember watching Bloodstream for 85, and I didn't have much love for that one either. But there's a couple features on here and there, like an interview with him talking about both these movies that was made for a DVD and things of that nature. And there's a commentary as well, which isn't incredibly in-depth, talks a little bit about the actors, some of the other stuff they did. And, I don't think Michael Murphy, thinks this movie's a masterpiece or anything, so that helps kind of like on reflecting on it. But that is The Last Night. Fun title. Maybe a little bit of similarities to like Pete Walker's Flesh and Blood show, being in the stage and things of that nature, hiding the bodies. But I think they could have done a little bit more, maybe change some things around. I don't know. I like Stage Fright by Michele Soave more on the stage, that idea that they're stranded, they're locked in, and they're fighting for their lives. And that one's a little different because the guy's completely mad. There's no way the reasoning with the guy. But overall, The Last Night is just okay. The last one from 1983 is listed as 86 on Letterboxd, but 83 on Internet Movie Database, and this is To Kill a Stranger. This is by the Mexican director who did A la Carta and Mary, Mary, Bloody Mary. A la Carta is a classic. Bloody Mary is pretty interesting as well. And I think this one fits with the kind of semi-interesting deal. The lead actress I'm not super familiar with, but it does have kind of a strong supporting cast in here. It has Dean Stockwell, and it's this one a Spanish or Mexican kind of horror film, but I know the director is, I believe, Mexican, so it's an odd kind of deal here. But we have Dean Stockwell in here, Aldo Ray, and the man, the myth, the legend, Donald Pleasance. I guess you could call this an essay, a DP essay double feature, right? With the Donald Pleasance sexual assault double feature kind of thing going on here, along with Wake and Fright, because that's kind of what Donald Pleasance does here. So we have a couple of, I don't know what country she's originally from here, it's supposed to be, but I believe they're Americans in kind of this country with a very corrupt kind of odd government, very, very military style ran, and there's she ends up driving to get to her husband, who's Dean Stockwell, and there's been an assassination at the very beginning, so things are not really stable or safe, and she's driving to her husband, and she gets in this car accident, and she ends up like damaging her car and in the rain, and Donald Pleasance pulls up. He's a very intelligent, well-spoken man. He's in a limo, and he says, I think he's limo. He's like, listen, come back to the house. He's got this accent, as he always does in every movie ever, a different accent. And he comes in, he says, come back to the house. My wife will make tea. She's from America. She's from Flagstaff, Arizona. We'll make tea. We'll relax. We'll get you warmed, and we'll take care of everything. And at first, you're like, okay, that sounds all right. You could trust Donald Pleasance, right? Of course not. But Donald Pleasance ends up wanting to do a kind of a dangerous game type scenario where he wants to kill or rape her, and it seems like he's done this before. He's very ready for it, and around his mansion he starts to try to kill her. She ends up getting the upper hand. I know this is kind of a spoiler, but I kind of have to get into this as it's the first chunk of the movie, but the second chunk of the movie is something else, so there will be spoilers on this one. She ends up getting the upper hand, killing him and dropping in a well, and trying to cover up all her tracks because this guy is a war hero, she finds out later. And Aldo Ray is a detective who's on the case, and Aldo Ray is kind of half drunk, half good in this movie, but there's some really funny lines. He's like, imagine, if you will, a guy pulls you over when he's trying to explain the story. He's fucking great. Aldo Ray's had a really weird run in throughout the early 80s and throughout his life, to be honest. Aldo Ray, classic kind of bigger actor, I believe, for France, and then eventually was in a lot of B crap, kind of as laughed at as kind of like being a drunk in his movies, but he's always memorable and has a screen presence. And this one, he's fun. But basically, it's Dean Stockwell and his wife trying to cover this up and hide from the major before he finds out what the hell's going on, and Aldo Ray's hot on the case. So that's all kind of going on here. Decent, kind of nice suspense thriller, filmed a lot like a horror film, especially that first act. And then the end, I think there's a nice little twist in here that I found appreciative. I thought this was a pretty decent overall movie. Kind of surprised it lives in VHS hell. As far as I know, maybe there was a DVD somewhere, but this looked pretty damn crummy. If there's a DVD, then I imagine it's probably just a VHS upscale. Worth watching if you're a fan of Donald Pleasance, and who isn't, Aldo Ray and Dean Stockwell. So yeah, interesting movie, and I like the director. Alucarda, I don't think they'll ever top that for me, but I know they did the Mansion of Madness as well, which I need to check out, which has had a Blu-ray release. But I love Alucarda, and that's another one somebody's going to mention. I'd love to see that on Blu-ray. I know the elements might be shaky on that. I believe so. All right. This is actually the last one from 1983. Sorry about that, guys. But this is called The Horror of It All. And this is a nice little documentary here. I'm going to be relatively short with it because there's all that not much to talk about, really. But this is just narrated by Jose Ferrer, who did his share of horror films, including in the 80s, including Blood Tide and Bloody Birthday and a million other movies. Definitely relation to Miguel Ferrer. Good actor, classic actor, popped up in tons of horror movies, The Bean as well. But he narrates this thing, and it's just basically talking about the history of horror all the way from the 20s, the German expressionism, moving on up into more modern times where we talk about Roger Corman and the sci-fi boom, and then we get all to the point of kind of where we're at now, where we're talking about the exploitation and splatter and blood of that nature. It has a bunch of interviews with people who have since passed. Of course, David Duvall is in there, still alive. Curtis Harrington passed away. John Carradine, Robert Bloch. So a lot of interesting people in here. Some people from the heyday of horror. They talk about the careers of Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Sr., all that kind of stuff like that. And they just give a brief rundown history of horror. It was very nice to see them mention, the Italian kind of boom with Mario Bava and Black Sunday of that nature and things like that. But also they just kind of do a nice little history of horror that is a rundown, getting people probably ready for what's more modern. But the fun thing is a lot of the older people are saying stuff about the lack of suspense and more gore and things of that nature. And they say, it's kind of becomes tasteless. It becomes incredibly tasteless that they're going to show us all this stuff and not talk about it or not do the visual, the idea that you don't necessarily have to show things. And they do that to a direct comparison to Curse of the Demon, Night of the Demon movie in here. But overall, Horror of It All was a fun little nice time waster movie for people that, didn't have the internet back then, couldn't do their own research. You pop in a VHS and you see a nice little history of horror that maybe somebody wants to go out and find the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or Nosferatu or the Hammer horror films, and rent them to get a grasp on what the hell's in the video store if they still have them, and kind of revive some of these classics for the modern audience. And it has a good group of people talking about it too. Obviously, I mean Robert Bloch is the writer of Psycho, and Curtis Harrington directed tons of movies like Night Tide and all sorts of things like that. So it's nice to see all these people in the same kind of little group like this, and just the idea that how much love there was for horror even in the 80s and before that. There's always been a love for horror and groups of that nature and like stuff like that. So it's not changed. I guess the fandom hasn't changed all that much. So Horror of It All, check it out. Okay, the Patreon pick here is Rome, Open City, and this is made in 1945 by Rossellini. What is it? Roberto Rossellini. Sorry about that. Classic Italian director. One of the big names. Like when you hear other classic directors, you hear, of course, Fellini, Bertolucci, Pier Pasolini. So you get all these big names like that. They're like running through my head. But it's one of these kind of directors here that, I'm not as familiar as I should be with them. You talk Argento and Fulci and Diodato all day with me and Bava. Maybe a little Fellini, but for the most part, I'm more familiar with the cult films. But I do appreciate, classic cinema, world cinema, and Rome Open City is an odd one, and it's I don't mean odd for a certain extent, because I don't know where you get to like the realism, the Italian neo-realism and stuff like that, but when you look at a lot of 40s movies from America and 50s movies, even when I was talking about Suddenly Last Summer, like the acting in that movie in the late 50s seemed incredibly dated. It didn't seem very naturalistic for me, and I know that was a style of acting, but when we get to Psycho, it's more naturalistic already in 60. But I'm watching this movie here in 45, is it 44 or 45 when it's made, but Rome Open City 45, and of course it's during the the Nazis in Italy. And, of course, Italy was an ally of Nazi Germany, so a lot of stuff you don't necessarily see a lot of Italian movies, except, like, of course, Ceylon Kitty by Tinto Brass and stuff like that. But to be on, and Visconti the Damned, but it's an odd, weird subject matter, right? To have the Italian kind of people standing up to the Nazis in this idea, right? The fascists in this area. And basically, there's these fascist element in Italy at the time, and it's taking place really close to when all this stuff happened. And, World War II is still going on at the time this movie is being made. So that's ballsy. And the acting is very naturalistic, very, documentary style, and that's kind of the appeal to the movie to me. And we basically are following a group of people that are trying to stand up to this fascist regime and all this kind of stuff like that. The main people, I think there's an Austrian that was an ex-soldier, there's a priest, there's a couple other people as well, and we're kind of going back and forth between one of the Nazis guys who's basically interrogating all these people and just trying to figure out where the rat is and get not the rat, but necessarily find out the whole underground movement and expose it so we can get everybody arrested, all that kind of stuff like that through torture and all these means like that. And we also have these other characters, who are basically they're rats. They rat people out and get them to a certain extent. There's like a love story tied into that as well, where one of the characters necessarily want to do these kind of things, but ends up being sucked into it. And doing all this kind of stuff like that. But it's a very tough back and forth character. But yeah, it's well shot. It's shot like in this very documentary style thing where you see a lot of the characters walking around these dark kind of streets. And there's a great scene at the end of the film where one of the Nazis is basically like, I used to think we were the master race and we can break anyone, but if these people don't break, aren't they just as good as us? And he's just drunk kind of talking and just upsetting the guy in charge, and he's just like, what's the difference at that point? Kind of just realizing what they're doing is complete bullshit, complete facade, kind of breaking on that idea like that. And at the end of the film, it's an incredibly iconic shot of the priest character, who's probably the most memorable and likable character within the film, but I think that probably stands out the most and is one of the most memorable things of the film. It's one of these movies where a lot of it is dated, but it's incredibly forward for the time in 45. I actually was impressed with a lot of this stuff, and this is the first one I've seen by this director. Like I said, I'm not an expert in all film. I'm mostly focused on cult films. I'll watch anything and enjoy it, and I like see these films like this because it really adds context to the cult films that I love, because you've got to understand what movies are lifting from and what they're being inspired by, and the history of the films to understand the exploitation films like that. Like we're talking about the Carl May movie earlier, and I had never seen Lawrence of Arabia, so I wouldn't have picked up on those references, which is awful. I've seen Zombie Bloodbath 2, Rage of the Undead a few times. Shout out to Sick on Cinema. But I've never seen Lawrence of Arabia, and that's what I think a lot of cult film fans' issues are, and myself included. But Rome, Open City, glad to watch it. Very interesting. At times it does feel like you're doing your homework when you watch this kind of stuff, but you're better for it, and you enjoy it, and you get all these kind of contextual moments and stuff like that in cinema. Great stuff. Interesting stuff too. Good Patreon pick. All right, let's get into these questions, comments, and concerns. Adam Watson. Hey, Ed, I'd like to ask you why the year 1983 is so special to you. I think we all have a certain year that stands out to us in movies that we love. Mine is 82 because of Basket Case, Creepshow, The Thing, Poltergeist, Cue the Winged Serpent. So my all-time favorites. Can't think of them all, but it feels a pretty pivotal year to me. I'm just going through the 80s. I love 81, 80, 81, and 82 are all fantastic years. 83 is the next in line. Been doing this for a while. There's tons of stuff for 82 out there. Over 200 movies covered. Over 20 special videos with guests. Over, I think, a 3-4 hour essay about 1982. And then a top 10 video with other guests and stuff like that. So I've done tons of 1982 footage. You definitely didn't miss it. Yes, I am going to do an opening for every year as well. I know you asked that as well. But yeah, I don't expect everybody to follow me all the time or keep up on me, but yeah, I've been definitely doing it in the 80s, and I'm going through the entire decade. Nick from Flanders, Nightmare is such an excellent anthology. It's like we will not be seen again, I fear. I love the Christina Rey segments. A pity she made only 2 horror films. I would state it's an even greater pity she left a business called acting, but I learned she's a nurse helping save lives now, so color me impressed. Yeah, she's great in that movie. She's actually, rewatching that, I think that the first segment is one of the better ones in it, if not the best. I think that and the last one are the best, but the bad-looking rat kind of ruins it a little bit. He has some questions. As we discussed Dan Curtis's movies on Blu-ray, which is your favorite Dan Curtis film? I can't choose between Trilogy of Terror and Burnt Offerings. Those are definitely the ones in the running. I'd go Burnt Offerings. Have you ever gone hunting? If so, did you enjoy it? Never been hunting. I've been fishing a bunch of times from Point Place. It's a peninsula town in Ohio, so I've been fishing a bunch of times. Don't go fishing so much anymore, but I would probably go maybe once a year just off a dock or something like that randomly with family. Both Salem's Lot and The Shining differ from source material, yet Stephen King likes one of them but loathes the other. Why do you think think that is? Well, he stated that The Shining was a very personal book for him. So the idea that the core source material, basically Jack Torrance didn't have his redemption, bothered him to the point that he couldn't get over it. And I understand. I don't understand because I didn't write the book, but I understand what he's saying. Till next time, God willing, P.S. I heartily recommend 2023's Vertilac, director Adrian Beau. Highly stylized, highly enjoyable. It's a French film. You're fluent past Mrparka. Yeah, Parka. But I did cover the Vortilac. Good stuff. It should be up on a video somewhere. K&J Horror. Oh, Nightmares. I always thought the Land Tiger segment was the best. When the truck comes out of the earth, that is the most badass scene. And then you see that upside down cross hanging from its mirror. Very, very cool. Indeed, that is a damn cool scene. Mr. Gestation. Hello, handsome. It's Tuesday already. Happy to watch you, as always. Thank you. Elk Vomit. Keep your eyes and wallet open for The Furious, which comes out in theaters June 12th. The movie is getting a lot of buzz in the material art film community. I cannot wait to check it out. Hopefully you go see it as well. I'll try if it pops up in my area. Thank you. Sawin Christ 500. You talking about Hunter's Blood got me thinking about the VHS Voyage series you did a while ago. I know you already mentioned a few, but what are some of your most wanted tapes trapped on VHS titles that haven't properly been put out on disc? Besides Hunter's Blood, what are some of your favorite titles that have finally got resurrected on disc in 2020s? One from VHS Voyage series that finally got rediscovered. Oh wow! So there's ones that never even had a VHS that I was super happy to see get a release. Let me think. Sometimes I was so happy about Hunter's Blood. One that I like to see is Chameleons. I love to see Chameleons get a nice release. That's a very wild and weird movie. I'd like to see one that I like is Blood Salvage that never had one. Homebodies got a Blu-ray. I was super excited about Homebodies. I'm over here looking at my VHSs right now. A couple other ones that didn't have one. That's The Keep was one that I don't love, but I was super happy to see it get a nice release. I like the book. And The Night Brings Charlie is another one I'd like to see hit Blu-ray. That's a fun movie, interesting movie. I know there's probably a couple other ones I'm missing. I'm looking at my VHS shelf right now. I'm looking at them. Monkey Boy is one that I'd like to see. The case has always been super memorable for me. Fright Show is one that was an anthology. I doubt it will ever get a Blu-ray. It's kind of an odd kind of thing, a bunch of shorts put together, but it was one I like. Nightlife is the big one. I mentioned that as well. A lot of them have been released. Like we got Alien Space Avenger. I remember liking that one from memory. I don't think that's ever had a release. Blood Beach is another one that's not great, but definitely could use a nice release. Blood Games is one that I absolutely adore. Definitely got a Blu-ray from Vinegar Syndrome. Very happy about that one. So there's tons and tons. I'm just going over. I'm looking at my VHS, which I rarely get to do because I'm usually have to turn around for it. But there's a lot that have had releases, and there's a lot that still have not. So it's kind of a mixed one here, but most of my favorites have got releases. Not all of them. There's some SOV stuff that hasn't either as well, like Todd Sheet stuff. I'm glad seeing that stuff getting released, and all sorts of cool stuff though. Yeah, but there's still a bunch of titles that have not been released. Eventually, maybe we'll get them all. Maybe not. There'll always be a couple, white whales out there. And then Way Up Dude gives me Mrparka Rules movie knowledge. Thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, and then we definitely got to do the Patreon drawing, but I'm going to take a cut here, and I'll be right back. All right, here's the Patreon drawing here. 5 titles coming out of here. Chris Rivers, The Old Guard. Then we have Dave Luton, Rashomon, 1950. Classic here. Rob, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Been so long. Mike Moore, Grand Slam, 1967. Another good one. I know it's an Italian one, if I'm not mistaken. And one more. We got Tyler Tadeo, Failsafe. And that's the other one that was made around the same time as Doctor Strange. That was about the nuclear stuff, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, let's get out of here, guys. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. As always, have a good one.